Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2 Meter Crew Antinet. My name is Nick, call signs KN6DAL, and I will be tonight's coordinator. Appreciate everybody coming out. And first, before we get started, I want to take a minute to support everybody and say thank you to all the people that support us, the W6VVR Repeater, the Vaca Valley Radio Club, the Freestar Network, Mike WG5EEK, and Greg KN6KIE for all the hard work that you guys do with the digital connections. Keep it up. We appreciate it. And we also want to just take a second. If there's any priority traffic or emergency traffic, we'll always clear the air. You can say break, break with your call sign. Let's just take a moment, see if there's any priority or emergency traffic at this time. And nothing being heard. The 2 Meter Crew is not an actual club. We're just a group of ham radio enthusiasts. We're learning and enjoying all things ham radio related. There's no dues or fees to be a 2 Meter Crew member. If you're looking for more information, you can visit us at www.2metercrew.net, or feel free to join our Discord group. There is a link to that in the description on YouTube. And always keep in mind, this is an open net. Everybody's welcome to join in. There's a number of digital connections that you can link to if you'd like to chat with us. We meet every Wednesday at 8 p.m., 3 a.m. or 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 3 a.m. UTC on the W6VVR repeater with the frequency is 145.470 with a negative offset of 600 kilohertz and a PL tone of 127.3. You can also access us through Echolink at W6VVR-R. All star node links are 51094 or 512342. DMR Talk Group 3174117. YSF Reflector 50462. And Freestar is also linked through All-Star Link 2195 and 53377. And if you didn't catch all that and you want to link up with us anyway, there is a scroll bar at the bottom of the screen with all of those digital connections. Check it out and feel free to jump in and say hi. The Anti-Net's also being live streamed right here at Northwest Ham Shack. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications when we come on next. Do we have any stations out there that have never checked in with us before, or new operators, maybe someone who just got their license or possibly an upgrade to their license? Or you just want to check in and say hi? Come on in now and tell us a little bit about yourself. All right, nothing being heard. We're going to move right into the topic. We've got an exciting topic tonight. We've actually got a guest speaker with us. This is Gaston. Call sign is KT1RUN. Also known for the Tech Prepper YouTube channel. He's got a number of really great videos, so be sure to like and subscribe to his channel. There's also a link in the description of YouTube to go over there. Make sure you give him a little bit of support. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to him and just give you an opportunity maybe to tell us a little bit about yourself, Gaston.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick. So yeah, I'm the Tech Prepper. I have a fairly new channel called the Tech Prepper, and I started it at the beginning of COVID and just wanted to share my experiences in roughly 6 or 7 years of becoming a prepper myself. And I don't know if you guys want me to start with kind of the beginning of how I got into it and why prepping, and then maybe how that turned into like a passion for radio. So I think it was maybe 7 years ago, I was living in Southern California and commuting to work to various clients on the order of maybe an hour minimum each way, upwards of 3.5 hours one way at the worst point of my career. And there was a pretty significant power outage about 60 miles from my home location near the office where I was at. And it was near the end of the workday. And basically there was just like massive gridlock, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to get home anytime soon. So I decided to call my wife, let her know I was going to be late, and then the cell network was fully overwhelmed and wasn't able to get any kind of signal to her. So I decided, you know what, I'll just go to the gas station and top off. Sorry guys, KT1RUN. Let me know if you need me to take a pause here and there. So I decided to drive over to the gas station across the street. And of course, the power was out, so the pumps didn't work. And there were actually a whole bunch of people that were fully stranded. So I decided just to take a step back and relax. And with a few colleagues, we went to another area where they had like an outdoor food court. And of course, they were all out of power. There were a handful of vendors who had backup generators, and they started selling basically food. So we went to go in and order pizza, and the POS was down, so no credit cards. I didn't have any cash. So after all this, I'm like, wow, I can't get home. I can't call my wife. I can't buy any food. And then like 30 minutes later, some enterprising guys were on the corner basically hawking like the 12-ounce water bottles for $5 a pop cash. And I was thinking to myself, what if this goes on for more than like a couple of hours or 24 hours? California, outside of the earthquakes, wasn't used to any kind of outages. So that was the kind of point where I'm like, let's figure out how not to let this happen again. And I started by looking at basically a get home bag, a bag I could have in the vehicle, where if it happened again, at least I would have some cash, the ability to walk home and change my shoes, because that first go around I had dress shoes on, not the kind of thing I want to try on foot with some leathers. And so I went from the go bags to getting into what they call everyday carry. And essentially for me, that was just a um, small bag that had a bunch of things that made me feel personally comfortable, like a water bottle, some change, some cash, a jacket. And it just sort of kept on evolving from there. The more and more I found myself in situations, I was pulling from these EDC bags, and that kind of parlayed into, all right, now how do we do 3 days at home? And that turned into stocking up water and food, and what types of water and food are appropriate. So, long story short, I realized very quickly that I was only focusing in one area. So then I got into firearms and went completely obsessed about firearms and firearm training, and then realized, well, I've got a gap in probably medical. So did the first aid route. And then ultimately, I'm like, what about comms? Thinking about that time when the cell phone infrastructure went out. And I had a real tough time with getting into my technician class license. It actually took me about a month to study with the Gordon West handbook. I bought the Yaesu, or sorry, the Baofeng UV5R to listen, and there wasn't a whole lot of activity in my area. So I put that on hold for a few years. So it wasn't until last year in 2020, when we moved back to Arizona, I finally got someone on the repeater, and just that was the spark for me. And we can talk about kind of everything that's happened since then on the radio front. Any thoughts, guys? KT1RUN?
Yeah, so what I'm kind of curious as far as like starting off with like the with firearms, getting involved in the tactical side of it, and then gravitating towards ham radio. Like, break that down just a little bit for me. What kind of made you transition to that? Because that's sort of the same way that I got into it. I've always been a big firearms guy. I've always been interested in that. And then I've always been interested in like just being prepared for emergencies, whether it be something as little as like the power goes out, and I can't, to some situations. What actually led me down the road of amateur radio was when I was living in California. The power went out widespread across a huge portion of Northern California, and everybody's cell phones stopped working. And I was like, okay, it's time to find a different way to communicate. So, did that cross your mind, or did you just naturally gravitate that because you saw things that kind of commingled with your interest in different things like firearms?
So I had some experience with firearms growing up. I grew up in California. So for us, we had just a small 22 rifle and a 38 pistol. So my dad took us maybe every few years to the range. So wasn't terribly experienced. But when we moved to Arizona about 7 years ago, I started to get into really active trail running with my lab and going into pretty remote areas. And we had an encounter the first 3 months where I was out about 6 miles in the backcountry with the dog. And we got basically cornered by a pack of javelina, which are basically like wild pigs, wild boar. And I had really nothing other than a pocket knife. And that was the point at which I talked to the family. I'm like, what type of pistol should I get? Like, what's the right size for me to carry in the backcountry so I could still um, run comfortably? And they recommended a G43, which is a subcompact Glock. And I started with that one, got a little bit of training, so I was safe with it. And then I realized, hey, this is really fun and relaxing. So we started to go more to the range, and then it turned into another addiction of trying out different firearms and getting more training. And then by the end of 3 or 4 years later, I was an NRA RSO and was volunteering at the range as a range safety officer. And it kind of settled there. But like I said, I got really obsessed with that aspect of preparation and didn't really focus on the comps. So at that point, I was like, I'm in the backcountry. I rarely have access to a cell tower where I'm at. Let's bust out the ham radio again. And I was finally able to make a first contact on a local repeater. And then since then, it's just been an evolution of trying out different things, simplex, getting bigger, more capable radios, trying out different modes like single sideband on 2 meters. And then really, I realized that I've hit the wall on what I can do with my tech license. I experimented with 10 meters a bit with FT8, and it was rough because it wasn't, the sunspot cycle was what it was, and I only had a handful of contacts, KT1RUN. So then I got the general. That was a bit more challenging for me than the tech, and then just got hooked on HF and decided to bridge kind of my background in backpacking with summits on the air. And I got hooked. I'm like, you could go backpacking and do radio at the same time, and you're the station that everybody wants to work. So it was really fun for me. So I haven't been doing as much summits on the air lately, but I try to get out at least once a month to activate a local peak.
KN60AL, I was just letting that break there for a second. Cool. So you've talked a little bit about what got you into amateur radio, and I totally concur. I kind of went down the rabbit hole, started off with the tech license, and then ended up getting the general and the extra, and just kind of dove into HF. It's so much fun. There's so many unique new people to meet, and it just seems to be getting. It's a lot of people that I've talked to have a lot more experience with HF than I do. Because I'm a relatively new ham, and I got my license right at the dead bottom of the solar cycle, and so HF was nothing like what it's been in years past. And what's interesting to me is that as we progress this kind of era of amateur radio enthusiasts growing up, we're seeing the cycle get better and better and better, and so every day it's just like more and longer and cooler contacts. And so I think it's a great time to be a ham operator. It's just my 2 cents. But out of curiosity, what would be the next thing for you as far as your ham radio endeavors? What are you trying to pursue, and what interests you there?
So I have way too many hobbies right now. I've got a whole whiteboard full of stuff I want to do. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work with digital tools for the field. I've been working on a project called MCOM Tools that is designed to make certain modes, digital modes of communication I like to do in the field to communicate with non-hams possible. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. And so I'm constantly tinkering with that application and fine-tuning it in the field. Packet is also really interesting to me, and I'm looking at reviving probably a local BBS in my area, starting with a home station build and trying to get a local packet BBS network going here for kind of off-grid comms. I grew up in the late 80s or mid to late 80s and early 90s. And for me, I was a huge fan of BBSs during the dial-up era. And there's just something nostalgic about doing something like that. I don't know if it's terribly practical, but it's an itch that I want to scratch. I think SOTA is also going to be a big thing in more field operations. So I'm planning on kind of pushing the envelope on multi-day excursions into the backcountry. The wife and I are actually seriously looking at getting ourselves a couple donkeys so that we can actually go out for a week at a time and not have to deal with the water or lack thereof out here in the Sonoran Desert, and do a full-on like radio kind of excursion over like 5 to 7 days.
Greg has some questions about your donkeys. Go ahead, Greg.
Shoot.
Hey, Kilo November 6 Kilo India Echo. I was actually just waving at Bert there, but I do, I kind of got started, I kind of started the same way myself. I've been a big outdoor guy, lots of hiking and stuff like that, lots of shooting as well. I'm a big fan of firepower. But I was like I was saying too. Someone in the chat, Mike Shoesmith, was talking about like a 4-day soda pota trip
Mm-hmm.
where he brought like a pistol or something like that. I've done some of that stuff, but not since I've been a ham. So I think it would be awesome to like combine the two, and
So yeah, so it's interesting. I did a video, I think maybe 2 weeks back, where I'd always done backpacking on its own, or a summit activation on its own, or the firearms on their own. And I combined all three of those 3 weekends ago, and it just about wiped me out. And I mean, not to boast, I'm not in the greatest shape, but I do exercise pretty heavily throughout the week and hit a trail every weekend. And I had a full plate carrier, full 30 round magazines, a AR-15 pistol, a full size duty pistol, and a 72-hour pack. And just doing 6 miles pretty much wiped me out in 7 hours. So for any of the preppers that do the tabletop reviews of their go bags or their 72-hour kits, good luck trying to do an excursion out there for any kind of amount of time. Like, it quite literally almost wiped me out. So those are the types of things I'm exploring, of what really is practical for a lot of these like bug out scenarios. And can I go more minimalist? Can I just do an overnighter with just my trail running gear? So that's probably the next kind of video I kind of want to experiment with, is to see if I could just stay overnight with just the gear I have my person and do a bivvy overnight.
Yeah, that's super cool. So as far as your channel, I've seen a few of your videos, and you focus a lot on like emergency communication and just overall emergency preparedness. So if you were to maybe give somebody some advice as like, hey, what are the first steps towards like just having good preparation in regards to, say, emergency communication, what would that look like to you?
So the first thing would be to get licensed. I would start with getting the tech license. The investment is less than $100 to start. And I found the Gordon West book pretty helpful, along with hamstudy.org, and even the entry-level Baofeng UV5R radios. I think you can get them as low as $25. That way, if you don't end up liking the hobby, you're out less than $100 total, and the time it took you to study. And the one question I get over and over on my videos is, I'm a prepper, and if stuff hits the fan, I don't need to be licensed. I'm going to get on the air. Well, I will tell you, I have tried in multiple locations to get on the air. Sometimes nobody's listening. You need to know which frequencies to be on. Also have a local set of relationships. I've been spending almost a year of fostering relationship with local hams on 2-meter simplex, on 2-meter sideband, few people on HF Nivis in my area that I'm starting to trust. And I know what times of day, when they're going to be there. And I don't know how you can come to it with just the radio, KT1RUN, and no experience turning it on, using it. So I guess my first recommendation would be get licensed and gain some confidence and start to build a local community of relationships, whether you're attending like a weekly net or just rag chewing with somebody on simplex. Because I look to these people, if I ever need to in the backcountry, to relay traffic on my behalf, where I know that they're going to be there and on air at that time. And those are a lot of the experiments I do when I'm in the backcountry, is just testing which spots in the backcountry I actually do have better success making contacts, whereas where are those dead spots, whether it's a spot or maybe it's a time of day of week. So get out there, get licensed, and practice and train.
Yeah, absolutely great advice. You're gonna probably hate me for saying this. So up in my neck of the woods, we have a lot of mountainous regions. So one of the things that I noticed right off the bat is VHF and UHF just doesn't work as effectively as it did when I was in California, because I was in Sacramento Valley, and so the valley is just like a bowl, and repeaters are over in the San Francisco area, or kind of up in those mountain ranges, and then over in the foothills of the Auburn, California area. And propagation is just amazing. You know, you can get into repeaters, you can get out really far. It's not unheard of to have, you know, consistent 100-mile simplex contacts from the valley floor, just because of the way your surroundings are. And then up here, it's completely different. So it's just not as good. However, the community of ham radio enthusiasts up in the Seattle and northwestern area of Washington is huge. And so Saturday and Sunday are just packed full of 2-meter simplex. People are constantly up on mountaintops making contacts. And you know, my advice on that end of it is if you're out in the woods and you can't get a hold of somebody, keep going higher. Keep going higher. Eventually, eventually you're just going to create more and more range, even on a non-optimal setup. You know, you're gonna eventually be able to get a hold of somebody. But yeah, super cool. So, what other hobbies are you into? What other things interest you other than just guns, emergency communication, and emergency preparedness? What else you got burning in the fire?
Mostly just software engineering. Like I'm tinkering with software all the time, and I'm a huge trail runner. That's the thing that I use to decompress. You know, it breaks my day in half. I go out for at least a 5K every day between meetings.
Yeah, you know, I kind of got into I don't know if it was trail running. It might have been more like trail jogging, but just got a good pair of trail running shoes and sort of focused on packing as light as I possibly could, or hardly anything at all. Maybe a bottle of water in my hand and just you know, embracing a trail as fast as I could and coming back. But that kind of turned me into. I've always been sort of a minimalist. Like I always want to take as little as I absolutely need to, but it seems that no matter what, I always pack whatever bag I have completely full. So in order to be a minimalist, I have to take the smallest bag I can, because if I take a big one, it's going to be full of junk by the time I'm ready to hit the trail. And I saw a video that you had made where you were attempting a peak, and it was just it looked really hot out, and it was just brutal. And you had, I don't, how much weight was that? Like 80 or 90 pounds on your back, just fully loaded with everything you could think of.
Yeah, I had two experiences. So the one I did a few weeks ago was a 73-pound pack with the plate carrier and the full personal protection loadout. And it was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it wasn't too bad in terms of temperature. I've actually done quite a bit worse, but it's funny. We were talking before the show about Adam K6ARK, and he's a huge fan of just like loading up on big radios. Like he'll even take the IC 7300 out. And there was one trail in particular that I hadn't done before. I kind of mangled the planning on it, and I brought the Yaesu FT891 with like a 12 amp hour BioWindow battery, and it was nuts. Like I started out, I think, in state trust land, and I shorted the actual trailhead from where I parked the Jeep by 2 miles. And there was all kinds of like cholla and cactus in the way, and like it was just beating me up. And after about 4 or 5 hours into this hike and going under barbed wire fences and throwing over the pack, I'm like, I'm done. Time to turn around. So yeah, I think looking at a minimalist setup is probably something that, like you, I need to do. And I think limiting yourself by getting a smaller pack is probably a good plan. The big issue we have out here is water. Like for those trips, I need at least 6 liters of water. And I believe the weight per liter is like 2.2 pounds. So it adds up, you know, just in the weight outside of the volume it takes up in the pack.
Yeah, absolutely. KN6DAL for ID. I'm going to let the repeater drop.
Yeah, when you do, I got a question.
All right, Jim, take it away.
Yeah. So Gaston, this is KJ6FMP. Jim, we talked quite a bit back and forth email and phone conversation about a week ago. So you had something you might thought you wanted to share on the screen. We can talk about that in a second, but about gear. So because you're a runner and that's your mental break from, you know, to break your day up, right, and get away. So and not to knock any other ham radio enthusiasts or amateurs, I'm packing a little extra insulation, and a lot of us are. And so I think a lot of people go minimalist partly because they know that, if they're going to take a bit of a hike or go somewhere, especially if they're going to be climbing, going in and up in altitude, they want to carry as little as possible for obvious reasons. So what I see is kind of the opposite with you, because, you already know what you can do running, on just a regular day with just you and, in your, iPod or whatever you do, if you listen to music when you run or not. And so, you can throw a heavier pack on and not run and feel fairly confident. So when you did the one the other week or two ago, I was watching that very intently because you had told me, you said, hey, I just dropped one out there. You got to go look at it. It's longer than usual, but I think it's a good one. And it is good because, you hit some snags along the way and, you were really working hard and, you wanted to get over to a certain spot and you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. You can read yourself. You knew you had probably bitten off a little more than you could chew, but at the same time, you were willing to try it. And so, I think that's impressive. And that's why I like watching what you do, because you don't carry, itty bitty tiny, like Adam will have a QRP little CW box that's, fit inside of an Altoids can, including the little wire antenna and all that stuff. And that's cool. I love that idea too. But I think the reality is a lot of us, we've got some bigger radios. And then if we're going to go, long haul for a few days, we're going to need extra batteries, et cetera. And all that crap is heavy. Water and batteries, man, that's the two heaviest things you're going to lug around. If you really think about it, everything else is, orders of magnitude less density. But the other thing is, you can comment on that. But then if you want to put I think it was the MCOMs you were going to throw up on the screen afterwards, then go ahead and do that.
Sure. Yeah, not too much to say there other than trail running helps, but I will tell you the one problem is that it gets me into trouble because I typically scout the trail first on my trail runs. So that same peak, I'll do in under an hour round trip. So I think, okay, no problem. I'm going to leave at 5 a.m. and sure, I'm carrying 65 pounds more than I normally am. And I'm probably going to do about 2.5 miles per hour, maybe 3 tops if I'm moving. So I've already kind of set myself for an unrealistic expectation when I jumped that much up in weight. And quite honestly, that trip, I should have turned back the second I got to the ridge and not continued. When I closed on that video, I had 2 miles left and about 8 ounces of water. Granted, it was all flat. It was on the 4x4 trail that I have done 100 times. But I started to lock up the last quarter mile home where I was about to knock at the first neighbor's house to say, hey, can you give me a drive 200 yards to my house? That's how bad it was. Or I was going to drop my pack, walk home and get the Jeep to pick it up. And I wish I had filmed that, but it was a lot worse than what I actually ended up showing in that video. So KT1RUN. And so I would say just know yourself. And when you start to have that spidey sense that goes off saying, am I going to be able to get myself out of this? The second you have that thought, it probably already is about 10 minutes too late. So start turning around would be my recommendation.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to screen share what you had brought, you were going to show us about I think it was about the ecom stuff.
Sure.
KN6DAL. I'm going to let the repeater drop real quick. All right, take it away.
All right, KT1RUN. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
Very good. So one thing I found as I was going into the backcountry and playing with digital, and I would essentially have a kit that consisted of a all band, all mode radio. So for me, it was the Yaesu FT818, which takes me all the way from, I don't know if it does 160, but 80 meters all the way up to 440. And the same thing with my Yaesu FT857D. I really enjoyed connecting that to my Raspberry Pi in the field, and doing primarily two modes of digital. One was APRS, the automatic packet reporting system, primarily to use the text messaging gateway called SMS Gate, so that I could send text messages to my wife over RF on 2 meters. And then I would also like to experiment with HF on 40 meters and 80 meters with WinLink to also send various types of messages. And the big problem I ran into was that I had to have a full-size screen. Like I could get away with connecting to my Pi remotely over remote desktop connection using VNC. But in the field with all the sunlight, all the heat, and having to use your finger to basically operate a desktop environment where you're going to essentially like a start menu, going to applications, opening up like the APRS client, and then navigating all those little windows, turned out to be a pain. And then switching modes, like going from APRS to WinLink to send emails, I actually had to open up a terminal and shut down a handful of services, because the software that basically interacts with the sound card is needed by both applications, and they're different applications under the hood. In one case, it's an RDOT modem, and in the other case, you have an application called Direwolf. So there was a very heavy startup and shutdown procedure on a very small screen using a desktop interface. And all I wanted to do was basically send a text message to my wife saying, I'm on this summit, here are my coordinates, I'm okay, or call for help. So I decided to kind of take a look at my software engineering background and figure out, is there a way I could build an abstraction layer, a very simplified interface where the interface could be my phone and a small web application. But under the hood, it's talking to all of these desktop applications. And what I built is a prototype called MCOM Tools that basically does that. So the way this works is you connect your Raspberry Pi to your radio, and then install this software package called MCOM Tools, which has not been released yet. And some of the things that it allows you to do with just connecting to the Wi-Fi and the Pi, it may sound contrived, but there's a large button here where I can basically turn off the Pi from the phone. Before, actually, again, I had to go to the menu and initiate the shutdown process, which required me to interact with the desktop. So that worked pretty well. The other bit of information I also wanted was some basic kind of like telemetry information. And the big one I wanted was to see what the CPU temperature was and utilization is, because I'm dealing with extreme temperatures out here, sometimes up to about 118 degrees Fahrenheit. So having the ability to have some really quick telemetry to see how hot is the CPU running also lets me know that, hey, you're about to fry your CPU if you go above like 160 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. So all of this was working great. I could also figure out what my local time was in UTC time and my local time for any contacts I was making. And then I could update those as well. But the real game changer for me was when I implemented an abstraction layer where I could have these different digital modes. In my case, I love doing WinLink RDOT, which means using WinLink to send email over HF. I've never got the WinLink packet to work correctly, mostly because I don't have a local or any kind of ability to get into a local 2-meter packet station, but it is supported. And then the other mode I love is APRS. So before, where I had to basically open the terminal, let me wait for the repeater to drop. KT1RUN.
You're good to go.
So awesome. So for example, let's say that I've connected the Pi, I've opened up my my web browser, connected to it, and now I want to send a message to my wife. All I have to do now is basically toggle APRS on, and it'll start Direwolf, which is a virtual TNC. It basically talks to the sound card. And then the APRS client, YAC, yet another, and that's a typo. It should be YAAC. And then I wrote an API on top of it that allows me to use all of YAC's capabilities to basically send messages. So when I had clicked that mode, it basically gives me a context-aware menu for APRS. And let's say that I want to send an email to my wife. I came up with a small templating engine where I could have all the stations I wanted to talk to. So I want to send a text message. And by default, it already includes her alias, which is @wife, and a pre-canned logo or pre-canned message. And then all I have to do is hit send. And it basically tells Yak, do your thing and send the message. And I'm done. And essentially at this point, I can go ahead and shut down the Pi. So my operating window now is what I like to call field expedient. I've gone from turning on the Pi to connecting to the antenna, switching to APRS, and sending her a message all within usually about 3 to 5 minutes. And then, let's say now I want to connect the HF antenna on 40 meters for NIVIS and get into a station. I have good luck in Colorado. I basically just switch modes, and then I get a similar experience now where I've got a templating engine that allows me to do things like, let's check into WinLink Wednesday. And rather than me having to type in and remember all the formats, I have these templates that basically allow me to do a proper check-in per their requirements. And then I can post this to the WinLink outbox, and it's already prepped and ready to go. So the mode behavior is one of those things that really allowed me to do these digital exercises very quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll talk about the last feature I've added, and maybe you guys could jump in and ask questions if there's anything that's unclear, or maybe get some questions from the chat. So I told you guys I really enjoyed working 2-meter single sideband, and I just discovered directional antennas about maybe a month ago. So the thing with directional antennas is that there is directionality, and for someone to hear me and for me to hear them well, I need to have a rough bearing of their location. So I basically took a small copy or a full copy of the FCC database, took a full copy of all the zip codes and their geo coordinates for the US, bridged those two together, and I've got a full offline search index where I could basically go and let's say that I want to talk to my buddy Doug K7EME, who's in Tucson, and I can look him up, and you can see here at the bottom that his call comes back, his first name, I get his grid, but it gives me a rough estimate of the distance between my location based on my GPS coordinates and the zip code that he has on file with the FCC, along with a bearing, in this case 154 degrees. And then all I have to do is take my Garmin watch and basically orient the Yagit his direction. And this thing has just been gold for all of my kind of single sideband contacts. I'm assuming I can hear them the first time to figure out what their call is. So all of this is in a beta state and not quite ready for consumption. I'm going to release it as open source. I've been talking to Jason, KM4ACK, and I'll be adding this to his Build-A-Pi package. So assuming you know how to configure already WinLink and APRS, you should be able to get this deployed to the Pi. KT1RUN.
KN6DAL.
So
oh, sorry. I want to stop. I have 2 quick questions on this. Question number 1 is, will it be available for the Build-A-Pi in an update, or do you have to go through and re-download the entire session?
I have to talk to Jason about that. Okay. I'll be doing the development off of his main development branch, but I don't think it should be a problem based on how he's built the update tool.
Okay. And then out of curiosity, have you field tested this? Have you have you tested its work? Yes, he's shaking his head.
Oh yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, it's on about probably a dozen videos, and you could actually see the evolution probably going back about 4 months ago. So a lot of these features were not there. I tested this during Field Day 2021, and I actually asked a whole bunch of the viewers on YouTube if they wanted to get a WinLink email from me when I was in the field. Give me your call sign, and I would look them up on QRZ. And I think I successfully, on 40 meters late in the evening, was able to send 26 people a WinLink email that basically had my GPS location at my campsite, what provisions I had left, and a few other bits of kind of status information. So yeah, this goes out with me every time. like I told you guys, I love doing soda. So I also have an APRS to soda built in. And the message format for soda is actually kind of gnarly and hard to remember. So in the past, I used to carry like laminated field cards. Now I basically have a template that will give me the format. So this is like a peak designator. The frequency I'll be on 144 decimal 200, which mode, single sideband, my call, and then my message. So very quick way for me to do it. So a lot of what you're seeing here in terms of the templates I built are built around a lot of the field testing. And the reason why I haven't released this yet is that I'm constantly changing this based on what's working well in the field and what's performing poorly. So you can see, I mean, it looks pretty giant, at least on my screen. There isn't a whole lot of clutter. So all of that has actually come from my field testing. I don't want to turn this into a difficult to navigate application. And that's why when you are done using a mode, it disappears. If you have too much messaging in the console, you can clear that. If you don't want to see your previous calls, clear that as well. So keep it simple, stupid is kind of the philosophy around MCOM tools and something that's being field tested and refined.
That's amazing. I really like that. And I know you said you're constantly changing things, but the interface, the usability of it seems very, very straightforward. So I'm excited to see when that comes out to test some of that out and see how it works. Is there anybody else in the chat that has a question? And then I'll take a quick break and we'll see if anybody else out on the air wants to jump in and has any questions.
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, Gaston, this is Can6KIE. Just wanted to say, when is this coming out and how can I get on the beta, man?
So I was planning on a fall release and it's not going to happen. I actually found that while I was able to get to this prototype very quickly, it's not in a state where I can maintain it. So I actually have to, I'm in the middle of a full rewrite of the front end. And the unfortunate thing is it's going to look the same, but everything behind the scenes is going to be re-architected so that adding new modules like the call lookup or another mode like JSX call will be a more pluggable thing. So I don't have a timeline right now is the short answer. I did myself a disservice by announcing a fall timeline because the prototype came together so quickly. But to get to, if you're interested in the beta, I started a site called buymeacoffee.com/thetechprepper. And you don't have to buy me a cup of coffee. It's great if you do. But what I do there, so I don't taint the YouTube channel, is that's where I post updates. So if you subscribe to it, at most you'll get one short email that might have a small YouTube video that's private. That's usually a few minutes in length, where I'll talk about the updates. And that's probably where I will announce the beta. And for the beta, I'm going to have some sort of hard requirements to make my life easier since I have a full-time job, the YouTube channel, family, all this stuff. And I want to start with people that know how to use PatWinLink on the Raspberry Pi and or Yak for APRS, because those have to be configured before this works. My application doesn't do anything to configure those for you. It just provides an interface to those applications if they're already working for you. And so, like I said, I think Buy Me a Coffee will be the mechanism for announcing the beta. And then I've also talked to Jason KM4ACK. I should have gave him the heads up I was going to be here tonight. And he's offered to let me cannibalize his Build a Pi Google group for a thread related to MCOM tools to kind of keep communication and overhead low on my part.
Awesome. I'm going to take a quick break, drop the repeater, and let's see if there's anybody out there that wants to chime in. Anybody out there on any of the digital connections or through RF that wants to come in and say hi or has any questions for Gaston, come on in now. All right, nothing being heard. I'm going to post a link in the chat for our Zoom call. If anybody wants to jump in, you're welcome to come on in. We'll keep the conversation alive for a little bit. And if anybody wants to come in through Zoom, you don't have to have a ham radio license. If you're just watching and you're interested and want to have a conversation, feel free to pop in. And with that, I'm going to turn the repeaters back to their normal operation. It's approaching 9 o'clock, so we'll give them a little bit of room to breathe and my foot a chance to rest. So I appreciate everyone for coming out with that. And the link is in the YouTube chat. Anybody's welcome to come on in. And yeah, I'll pass it back to anybody on the panel here. Anybody have anything they want to add?
No, I just want to make sure that I think we've got all of your links in the YouTube chat, and when people get on here, we should put them in here too. But just make sure so that you've got an Instagram site, you've got a website, thetechprepper.com. You've got a YouTube channel called The Tech Prepper. So I'm picking up a theme here. And then you got the Buy Me a Coffee site where people, and so I go there all the time to see what's going on. I did buy you a cup of coffee a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. I don't remember when. Just want to make sure, is there any other places that people can, watch you, hear about you, see what you're doing? Or is that kind of the gamut?
Just one more. So also Twitter, it's a necessary evil. I find the people there to be a little bit more pedantic. So I tend not to post as much there. So Instagram is really where I'm most active. I post about 2 or 3 times per week on all things prepper, ham radio, outdoor related. So that's probably the best place. And then the Tech Prepper website is still a build in progress. I just have migrated over there. So there's not a whole lot of content, but I am starting to post things like the Pi gear that I'm using for MCOM tools. So I'm slowly putting together a shopping list for the Pi 3 and 4 and posting things like the field cards out there. So it's evolving over time. And so I would say between Instagram, YouTube, and probably Buy Me a Coffee, I would say those are the 3 right now that I'm most active in publishing content.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned gear too, because I think I had mentioned that to you a couple of weeks ago, was that, people are just goofy about gear. And it doesn't matter if it's motorcycle gear or gun gear or camera gear or, mountain climbing gear or ham radio gear or whatever. People love to know, they see like those freaking rails that you have for the 857. What's that company? Anyway,
Armorlock.
Yeah, those things are fantastic. I got a pocket full of change here. I'm saving my money up. They're not cheap, but man, they're built really good. And you guys need to go watch some of his YouTube channels where he's going out with his 857. That one's the 818, right?
That's the 818.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cool thing about the pack frames, and I don't get paid, I do know the owner, we built a relationship, is that you can mount the antennas on the top side. So I've got VHF over here and then HF on the other side. So I found some like small whip antennas that'll do 20 watts. So on the 857, it's actually a very capable setup. And I keep the antennas in the side pouch. So the 818 bag now comes in like at 9 pounds. And the cool thing is just operating vertically. And there's enough space on the bottom of the rails where you get enough ventilation and none of the connectors on the bottom stick out past the end. So it also protects the coax connection and any of the digital and key connections as well.
Yeah. Hey, what kind of a battery do you rock with that too?
Yeah, so there's a small admin pouch on the front, and I run a 4.5 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery from BioWino. And on the 818, it gets me about 5 hours of runtime. And on the 857, since I usually am listening more than talking, I get about 2 hours-ish and change, depending on the mode and things like that. But both those bags also have a Buddy Pole Power Mini solar charge controller. So I have the ability in my pack to also run the 20-watt power film panels to top them off. And in fact, with the 818 and its current draw of about 750 to like 900 milliamps, I can pretty much maintain that battery the entire time I'm operating during the day without depleting it. So I've done a few videos where I talk about kind of the gear, and it's probably time for a dedicated kind of pack dump of, all the different parts that I use in the field.
Yeah, I was always impressed with the videos I've watched, which is most of them, to be honest with you, because you're very thoughtful about it, right? You do a lot of, you're very analytical, and you know what you want, and sometimes you have to try a few different things to get there. And I think the thing that I love about amateur radio is that's exactly what it's all about, right? You can never get tired of all the different kinds of things that you can do with amateur radio, but it's not like, oh, I need to go buy a car. I'm going to go buy a car. They all have four wheels. Well, most of them do, and they got a steering wheel and blah, 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 and pedals. It's totally different, right? There's options in those things, but they're all the same. They all got air conditioning. They all got, leather seats if you want them. But the variety of ways that you can tackle a problem with amateur radio it's almost endless. I mean, look at the wire antennas that people just throw up in a tree. Literally, they throw up and just hang them up there, and they're freaking radiating and talking to people lickety split in 10 minutes, right? And then there's other people that have the 35-foot tall Cushcraft antennas, waving around in the wind, and so you can do everything under the sun, from a spool of wire to a $1,200 antenna, and everything in between. Portable, in your car, handheld. I mean, good grief. And then you got all the digital modes for people that do digital modes. I'm not a digital guy yet, but eventually I'll get there. It's just
right.
You can't. I think it's going to be the hobby you never let go of.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those you take into retirement. But you're right. The gear that I have, and what I think is I'm building towards having it be an appliance for emergency communication. That's my goal. So even this man pack has gone through about 4 or 5 iterations, and I will be done with this man pack series once I have everything that works correctly in the field and can be handed to someone in an EOC and say, hop in your truck. And it basically end to end walks you through the deployment of the antennas and doing the communications. So even the Raspberry Pi, to be honest, is not my favorite platform. It's the path of least resistance, but I'm looking at some commercial or industrial tablets right now that I'm under NDA that will actually solve my heat problems in the desert and the glare problems I'm having. And because I've cooked about probably a half dozen Raspberry Pis out in the Sonoran Desert. So for me, it's a toy. It'll work for probably everybody else, but for me, I'm finding that it's falling short.
Well, yeah, and when you cook it, you can't eat it. That really sucks.
I saw a video
Put a steak on it.
I saw a video that you had made, and I thought it was hilarious. I don't know if you meant it to be funny, but you were doing you were setting up your RV for HF, and you went into like this serious conversation about how I want to make sure this is modular, like I can take it and I can install it and remove it really rapidly, and so I found a unique way to mount it. And he you just go into detail about it, and then you pull out a bungee cord and strap it in, and you're like, there you go, and that's how you do that. And I just was like, this is awesome. I didn't know if you were trying to be funny, but that was hilarious.
No, so that was the engineering solution that presented itself, right? I had a bungee cord that was the right length, and I field tested it. We did a 600-mile road trip in it and took it down the highway, tops at about 70 miles an hour, and the bag didn't move. So I'm like, you know what? It has the right attachment points. It works, and it's lightweight, and it's a 50-cent piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always constantly trying to find like different ways to, because I want to be able to go HF mobile. The problem that I have with it is I don't want it to be all the time. I don't want to leave HF rigs in the vehicle. I just don't trust society enough to do that. And I can't control if somebody takes an antenna off unless I remove every antenna before I get out of my truck. But as far as the radio equipment, I want to bring that in. and then just maybe sacrifice the 2-meter mobile, and that is what it is. If somebody rips that out, that's fully installed. But I want the HF rigs to be modular too, and so I'm constantly messing around with like cup holder mounts and different things like that to see what works. So
Yeah, that Lido mount is actually pretty nice. I've got one in the Jeep, and it basically is holding the head unit for the Kenwood D710GA, which is the dual band 2-meter 440 rig. And like you, I don't want to leave that in there. So I actually pull out the cup holder and the head unit and hide it under the seat if I, go into, the mall, or I haven't been to a mall in years, but if I'm in town, for example, I'll basically hide it for the day. So nothing real permanent and visible.
yeah, I'm just looking at those now. They're actually fairly reasonably priced here.
Yeah, they're good and they're easy to torque down. And like I said, I took that off road this past weekend out to Prescott, Arizona, and we were going through some pretty rough 4x4 trails, and it didn't move a bit. And in fact, it was funny. I forgot who was talking about it, but I was at 6,000 feet and was trying to make a simplex contact and nothing the first day. Couldn't get into the APRS digipeater. Next day, we move about a half mile and 300 feet higher. All the APRS packets went through, and I had 5.9 signal reports going into central Phoenix where I live. So it's just crazy how stuff like that works.
So you were talking about a tablet that you're looking at as a possible solution, because one thing that you're obviously forced to consider that I think a lot of people aren't considering is Raspberry Pis are relatively delicate, and how can you create a situation that is a little bit more versatile and can be used in all different situations. So is this tablet is it like a Linux based tablet, or how does it work?
So I'll be getting this tablet next month. I contacted the company. It is the Mesa 3, and it comes in 2 models. One is Android only, and the other one is Windows. And I'm not a Windows guy at all. I mean, I still have machines that run Windows 95 for my classic gaming. I've got my first PC still. And that's where my Windows experience ends, is circa, late 90s.
So I think part on it too, man, because that was the shit.
Yep. But so yeah, I asked for the Windows tablet basically, and it's going to force me to try to figure out how to port MCOM tools to Windows, which I was never planning on doing. So I'm going to figure out a way to make that work. And the reason why I like that tablet, why I reached out to them, was they have 2 batteries. So there's like a primary battery, and then there's a secondary one that's hot swappable. So in the field, you can quite literally remove and change out the larger battery without turning off the device, because the internal one will still be there to kind of keep it going while you do that change out. And just the ability for it to operate at a much higher operating temperature is really what I'm looking for. So again, my goal is to get to an appliance for what I want to do for digital field expedient communications, but have it work in realistic environments. Because I will tell you, I don't care what anybody says, the Pi is extremely delicate. There are 2 major failure points I actually found out in the field, and it's the SD card going bad. So cloning those things like crazy is an absolute must, and the cable for power. I found that the cables go bad and it's not able to draw enough voltage or current to keep the Pi actually running. And that's why I'm looking at other options. I think the other thing that people are trying to do is they're looking at protective cases as the solution for ruggedization. And again, the internals of those systems are not designed for certain environments. So yeah, you could drop them, but I'm really looking for, has everything about that been ruggedized? And this company is targeting a commercial space. So there are people that are, working 50 stories up on a building. They're down in mines. They're out in the field. So I actually don't even know what these things cost.
They're unreasonably priced.
But if it works for me, it might. Yeah, exactly. It might be the kind of thing to look into for what's needed for the field work out here.
Usually when the website doesn't actually say how much they cost a lot.
Or you have to buy like 50 of them in as a minimum order.
Right.
I would
It's like
think that with a
$2,000
pie
to
too, especially out like in Arizona way, that it would just be incredibly hot, that you'd probably just fry those things from turning them on after a while. Like drawing
Yeah.
the heat off of those things would probably be kind of a chore too, right?
So it's funny. I did a video, I think maybe 6 weeks ago, where I used the proceeds from Buy Me a Coffee and I bought a whole bunch of cases. So I had passive cooling cases with the heat sinks. I had some that were heat sinks plus fan. And I benchmarked all that. In fact, I instrumented the Pi to capture the telemetry. So every minute it would pull the CPU for temperature. So I could come back home and actually graph it. And I found which cases worked the best. Oddly enough, for me, the ones that were the most efficient were the passive cooling cases that were basically a large aluminum heatsink as the case with a lot of contact with all of the like CPU packages, but it doesn't work out in the field. So inside the house, it would keep them like nice and flat where the standard deviation, even under load, wouldn't be more than like a degree, but they wouldn't work out in the field. I actually got negative returns because of the ambient temperature out there. So I actually found for me, the best thing to do is go oversized fans and then try to solve it with bringing more power into the field. And then I also had to worry about like ingress protection, like dust and dirt getting in since I'm out in the Sonoran Desert. So then I found like covers for all of the unused connectors, like the HDMI port. So yeah, there was a whole test. I did about 4 different cases, maybe 5 cases, and kind of went through the metrics and what I found to kind of be the best. And it's not great. The winter is still kind of dying here and there.
Yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like you've done a lot to consider trying to make it a super field operational device, but it just seems to be falling short under extreme demands, I should say. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that are using Raspberry Pis remotely that are having a lot of success with them, and I don't want people to be discouraged to try it. I mean, it's a huge learning experience, and there's a lot of things you can take away from that, but under extreme conditions, you know, everyone's innovating and coming up with more viable options. So I'm curious to see what you come up with as far as you know, what works for you, because that you're in kind of an area that's a good benchmark for really crappy environment to be in. And you know, also finding people, like there's a lot of people in wet climates and stuff, and how does that affect, you know, I haven't yet taken a Raspberry Pi out in the field, so I'm just starting down that road, and we'll see, because I live in a very wet environment, and it'll be interesting to see how things hold up used out here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I absolutely recommend the Pi. I'm not knocking it. I will tell you, when the Pi fails, the iPhone also fails, because the iPhone has a max operating temperature, at least the iPhone 8 that I have, of 114 degrees Fahrenheit. So they typically die together, or at least the iPhone goes into that weird temperature mode where it's like, I'm done, cool me off before I'll come back to life. Mm-hmm. So, and the GoPro dies too. I have a lot of footage that I lose almost on every outing, where the GoPro just shuts itself off because it can't deal with the heat. So the tarp shelter I bring is also for the devices, not just me to get out of the sun.
Yeah.
Well, that Arizona sun, man. I mean, I know it was 108 here in Vacaville today. I can't imagine. That's like that's not that big of a deal out in Arizona. Out in Phoenix way, man. I've been there in 122 degrees. The streets are dead. They're dead in Phoenix till like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, Greg, what kind of humidity do you have when it's 108?
What's that?
What kind of humidity do you have when it's 108?
We don't have a whole lot of humidity here in Vacaville. Maybe, 10, 12% or something like that out here today.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's basically what we typically have outside of this like unusual monsoon season. So yeah, I'll go running every day at 105. The neighbors finally said, "Oh, it's the crazy guy running in the heat. He's cool. He hasn't died over the last year, so we'll just like stop asking him if he needs water."
Yeah, my grandparents used to live out there when I was a kid, and there'd be nobody in the neighborhood in the daytime. You'd just see nobody until about 8 p.m. Then all the kids would rush out to the street and watch the big sky fireworks, the thunder rolling across the sky in the summertime. It's really beautiful, but it's just horrendous in the daytime, man. I can't
Yeah,
stand it.
it's fantastic. We have the snowbirds, right? So people that typically have to deal with the snow most of the year, they come back to Arizona usually like end of September, early October, and they stick with us until probably early June and go back to wherever. We have a lot of Canadians too. So for us, we love going to dinner in the summer months because we don't need reservations anywhere. We just there's no wait times because half the population is gone. They've gone back to Ohio or wherever the heck they live.
Yeah. That is very cool, that Mesa machine. Yeah, that doesn't look fun, man. What do you develop with? What kind of tools do you use? Are you like a C+ developer? Are you a Python guy?
No, so I work mostly in web content management and enterprise search. So if you've ever been to a website that has like a search box, I primarily build search engines and content-driven sites. And the language that the commercial platforms use is primarily written in Java. So I've been a Java developer for 2005. And so MCOM Tools actually is written in Java using a framework called Spring Boot. And the reason why I chose Yak as the APRS client is because that's also written in Java. So I was actually able to extend that developer software myself to make it talk to MCOM Tools because it was written in Java. There's another competing APRS client called Exaster, and it's written, I don't know what language it's written in, but it's something that I'm not familiar with. So I don't know if it's C++, Python, Go, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm a Java developer for the most part, and then do a lot of Linux, Unix, Bash shell scripting.
And Java is primarily platform independent too, right? So you could put that in Linux boxes as well.
Yeah, so I have hope that when I get that Mesa 3 and have to deal with Windows, that I really just have to deal with the integration with probably WinLink Express, figure that out. But all the Java-based stuff should work just fine on Windows.
Well, that'd be interesting. Because that's a lot bigger than the pies. That's the trade-off, but at least it shouldn't die.
But then I also don't need the phone. So.
Oh, okay.
Or the cable mess. The problem with the Pi is that it's what I like to call the Octopi. It's got like the power cable coming on one side, and then I've got the GPS dongle coming off, the cat control coming off, and it's just a freaking mess. And it's like this little tiny thing, but you've got like just as much cables taking up like twice the space.
It's this big, but really with all that crap hanging off, it's about that big,
Yeah, it doesn't fit in the bag, so it drives me crazy. That's why I say I don't think that the Pi is the end all be all. I think it's perfect for 99% of the people in this hobby, but
they're great. They're
not right for my use.
They're utility, like a Baofeng. If it breaks, that kind of sucks, but they're cheap. You could get another one and be right back at it.
Yeah, and you could experiment too. Like I said, you don't have to even worry about having a couple $100 expense. Although the Pi 4s can get up there now between the Argon 1 case, which is beautiful. The Pi 4 is more expensive, and people are even doing the SD drives on those things. So you could actually have a Pi build now that is $250 or more.
Like an M.1 drive or something like that on it?
Yeah, something like that.
I have a Rock 64 that's got a little mount for one of those too. I'm like, oh, I want to do it, but I really need to do this. SD card's cheap enough. I don't need it to boot that fast.
You should do it. You should just do it.
I use it as a YSF reflector, and it just runs forever. Never gonna play with that thing, man. Love it.
When you connect to internet on your Pis, do you usually just connect through your phone, or do you bring a separate hotspot?
So I have my Pi, I have it configured a little bit differently than Jason KM4K's or KM4ACK's Pi. I configure my Pi on a clean install with something called bridge networking mode. So it basically will bridge the Ethernet port with the onboard Wi-Fi. And that Wi-Fi is configured as a hotspot. So I actually see it as a wireless router. So if I connect that to the Ethernet at home, I actually have basically a wireless router there. And then in the field, I use that same interface. The other thing I do, assuming I don't have an Ethernet connection and I want that routing, I also buy the little USB Wi-Fi dongles. So I actually have two Wi-Fi interfaces, and I can still do the same type of routing, which is pretty slick. So if the Pi is out in the shack, which doesn't have any Cat5 Ethernet, it can still be online when there's another hotspot. So I'm planning on doing some other techniques. I think even Jason talked about using the hotspot on the phone and configuring the Pi to talk to it. That's feasible and would work with my configuration. The big problem I have is where I go, I never have cell access.
Right.
And that's why I rely so much on things like APRS and WinLink in the field. Like, it is the only way for me to communicate to anybody out there.
You have access
yes,
to a lot of packet radio on WinLink out there? I mean, I'm aware of one here that I could hit with enough power, but I don't see a whole lot of that all the time.
So I built support for it. I think it works, but I don't have a WinLink packet station I've been able to hit. The closest one to me, if it actually is active, is about 71 miles, which I should be able to hit on the peaks, but for some reason I've never been able to get into it. What I can get into are the digipeaters that are 70, 100 miles out for APRS.
APRS, yeah.
And then I use WinLink on HF primarily. And I have figured out which stations work on 40 meters and 80 meters, depending on the time of day. So as an experiment, I haven't done it in a few weeks, but I would always try WinLink Wednesday check-ins in different locations with different stations and different antennas. And I haven't decided if I want to release my findings, but I keep a log of how long and how many attempts it takes me at what time of day against which station to get into. So I built kind of a historical roadmap and kind of like scorecard of, if it's this time of day, this day of week on this frequency, your best bet is this station. And I've been fine tuning that for almost 6 months now. And I have it pretty much dialed in where I can figure out what station to talk to by looking up my doping chart.
Are you looking at anything like Arden or anything like that as well?
So I want to. I have a bunch of the Linksys, was it the WRT54G routers that I probably would want to reflash. But it's one of those things that I'm trying to stay more primitive these days on the digital front and stick to like the analog radios and having them interface with the software on the Pi for right now. But Arden is like a 2022 roadmap item for me.
So it's got to be old tech then, huh?
I love old tech.
Dude. It's one of those big realistic bad boys, man.
So actually, let me show you guys something real quick here, if you don't mind. I kind of want to poll everybody. I'm planning on making swag for the channel. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yep.
So I've got this terminal window over here. So I'm a big fan of ASCII art and my logo. And for those who know, this guy's Calce, and you can pass them any expression and it'll print it out. So I'm thinking about doing a Tech Prepper blacked out t-shirt with just this prompt here, and then maybe changing the prompt here with like MCOM tools or something to make it real fun. The other t-shirt idea I did this, and I'm not an artist. Let me turn this off here. This mock-up of like a comic strip for kind of my WinLink in the field operation.
That's perfect.
Because when the power goes out at the house, we lose our microwave tower for the most part, even if we're on battery backup. And I send my boss emails over WinLink on HF saying, hey man, power's out, internet's out. I'm off grid for a while. I'll make up the hours tonight over a WinLink email.
Yeah.
Hey, if you make some swag shirts, hey Connor, did you add him? I don't know if Connor can hear me. Did you add him to
Yeah.
our admin group?
No. No.
Post. Okay. Find a way to contact him and post some links to us, and we'll pick up some of those shirts, or maybe a hat
Oh,
or
cool.
something.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, we're coming. So I love the hat. So I've been wearing this hat. Oh,
It's frizzed.
For 74 years.
for basically since day one of the channel, and I wear it on all my trail runs, and it is just a greasy mess and falling apart. So I'm about to hit 5K subs probably next week, and I hope I don't jinx the channel, but I'm replacing the hat because I can't take this one anymore. This was given to me by a family who served in South Korea, and it's done. So yeah, I was thinking about the hat idea. It'll probably be a camo hat, and then I'll sell maybe like a tech prepper patch.
Yeah, cool.
Will be kind of like the swag combo.
Cool. Yeah, well, let us know. And
Yeah.
we definitely we will consume some of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Any more
Right on,
questions,
guys.
guys? I don't know what's going on in terms of timeline or time frame.
It's
Oh,
whenever.
Yeah, we just kind of roll with it. I haven't heard much from Bert. How are you doing, Bert?
I'm doing all right. Sorry I was late. I had like emergency work come in just like right before I was about to get on at 8 o'clock, and it's just like, oh, we gotta do this right now. And then,
Oh, it's all good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally understand, dude.
Yeah, like the whole pepper thing and even trying to get climbs on stuff like that, just trying to get yourself to be able to go is like probably one of my biggest hardest things to like get out there. It's like, oh yeah, let's just go. But the family's like, nah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and one of the things that I try to stress in my head when it comes down to, because I mean people classify preppers like they kind of use that word almost derogatory sometimes.
Yeah.
But really like the mindset of just what do you do in a situation. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to leave and never come back to your house, and that could be part of it, but also like what are you going to do if you have to stay in your house? Like what if you can't leave your house? What's your plan for that? And just thinking through all the different scenarios. And one thing that someone brought up, I forget who it was, but it was a newer operator, and we were talking about emergency preparedness, and they said, hey, remember the people, make sure the people that may not know how, like if you have elderly people in your home, do they know how to open and shut the garage door manually with no power? And that was like a voila
Terry
moment
was
for me. It's
talking
like,
about that.
what was that?
Terry,
Yeah,
Terry was
Terry, that's who it was. Yeah. And
yeah, I remember that.
And just that, I mean, that's an incredible piece of information that, like, I don't have any elderly people in my house, but I do have children. And do they know how to open up the garage door manually? Probably not. I doubt it. I mean, they probably broken stuff in here enough that they could figure a way out. But, those are just things to think about. And like, one of the things that I like about Gaston's channels, I was watching it and I was just getting pumped up. Like I was just getting excited, right? And so I've got like in my garage, I've got screens all around me, right? I've got force monitors for my computer, and I had you up on a monitor, and I had the new Raspberry Pi going, and I just start like unloading preparation stuff like food, water, whistles, emergency blankets. Like I'm laying them all out, and I'm like, I'm building different bags. I'm going to go through the bags we have. I'm just going to make sure I've got everything set up so the kids know what they need to grab, where they need to get it, just all that stuff. And for me, hopefully we never get into a situation, whether it be natural or man-made, that we have to worry about that stuff. But I mean, every one of us, regardless of where we're at, we're on the West Coast. We're right on the ring of fire. We're right in a situation where there could be catastrophe as far as earthquakes and things like that. And that's completely natural. We, as a society, or I shouldn't say society, but in our area up and down the West Coast of the United States, it's usually every 300 to 400 years you see a massive, devastating earthquake, and we haven't seen one, and it's been a long time. We've seen small ones that have, collapsed bridges and disrupted life for a period of time, but we haven't seen any like completely devastating earthquakes that could really just shatter our lives as we know it. And what are we going to do to find our loved ones and communicate with the people that we care about and stuff like that. So it's all good learning information.
It's all fire here in California, man.
Yeah,
like
fires.
As I'm moving out to the East Coast here pretty soon, it's kind of funny, I was reading SOPs. This is a newer company I'm working for. Everyone's got the same set of SOPs, right? And I'm reading these things, and it's talking about funnel clouds. And I'm like, I've never read one that's mentioned funnel clouds before. I've worked on the West Coast all this time. It's all about earthquake and fire. Now they're talking about funnel clouds. And instead of getting out of the building, they're like, get into the center of the building, get into the absolute center of the building. Yeah. And, me not knowing anything about this, I'm talking to some of my new coworkers, and I'm like, so what's this about the funnel clouds, dude? He goes, it's not like it's going to rip your house off. He goes, off the foundation, or he goes, what's realistic is flying branches, trees getting ripped up and smashing into your car and causing havoc like that. So it's really like situational awareness as to where you're at,
Right.
You out there, Gaston, you guys got to deal with exorbitant heat. And like you said earlier, water's a huge deal when you're out there, out there you got to bring this in with you. Whereas it's kind of the same way here where I live in California too. But when I go to North Carolina, that's not going to be the issue as much, Right. It's a really humid place, hurricanes and funnel clouds. And I've been watching in the 4 or 5 months I've been working remotely, some of the weather that those folks are dealing with. And I'm about to dive into it. And it's completely different than like my prepper plan for out here. I mean, there's just a lot of it that needs to change to fit that kind of scenario,
Well, those guys actually are better prepped in general because they have a season that comes through every year that takes down power. So almost everybody who's been through it at least once has the generators on hand, the fuel stored up. You don't see too much of that in the West Coast in California. At least growing up, I never saw that. We had maybe the Northridge earthquake was the big one I can remember growing up. And that was localized to a couple of areas. But you're right. It's all dependent on what your location is, and the things that you need to prep for are going to be different. There'll be some similarities across the board, some basics, but the weather, I think, is the big one. I was really surprised with the weather that came through Texas in particular, because they don't experience extreme cooling and snow like that pretty much ever.
That was
that was nuts. And what really struck me, and I was thinking to myself, is people were complaining about not being able to get water because the utilities were down or the pipes were frozen. And I'm like, there's plenty of snow. Everybody has a barbecue. Yes, no. You can start your barbecue if the propane tanks, or if you still have charcoal, and boil this or melt the snow and boil it. So little things like that, I was surprised that was missing from a lot of people's bag of tricks. So I've learned not to make any assumptions on what people know or don't know.
They don't know way more than they know, and they don't care to know it. That's the honest to goodness truth. I have a lot of my neighbors know that I'm fairly prepared, and they'll come over sometimes because I'm out in the shop. If I'm not in here working, I'm out in my shop. And I'm a friendly guy. So they come over, hey, Jim, I want to start getting more prepared. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm going to get myself a 20-foot trailer and pack it full of stuff and getting a 1-ton Ford to haul it around. And I was like, okay, wait, what's up? Well, if I have to bug out, I says, look, here's the reality of it. You're not going to have to bug out. You're most likely going to have to bug in. So let me just peel this onion back right down to the center of the onion. And I'm going to ask one question to determine if you even have the first thought of being prepared. How many fire extinguishers do you have in your home right now? And they're like, what's that got to do with being prepared? I'm like, you should not be thinking about this the way you're thinking about it. If you want, I will step you through everything you need to do. And the very first thing is grab yourself $200, go down and buy yourself a whole batch of small fire extinguishers and 2 large 25-pounders for your kitchen. And I can show you photos of my kitchen fire from January 2nd, 2 years ago. I went through 3 small bottles and 1 big bottle to put that out. And I still call the fire department because you know why? Your insurance policy won't cover you if that thing lights back up and you didn't call the fire department to make sure it's really out. So there they come, code 3 down. I'm like, turn the sirens off. I'm talking to dispatchers. Oh, you don't need sirens or lights. I just need you to look at the damn oven and I'm cool. She's like, you called a fire and we're going code 3. I was like, all right, fine. Funny thing is none of my neighbors noticed.
Yeah, well, that's a good call out, Jim, because we had the same issue where we had some fire scares out here when we first moved. It was really dry and we almost had to evacuate. And that's the first thing we did. We bought probably about 15 fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
And we actually have them in each vehicle too, because another common issue we have is on I-17, which is our kind of big drag going north and south.
Yeah.
You'll have like chains dragging from people with trailers, and a spark will set off like the entire hillside. All it takes is somebody to pull over and have a fire extinguisher in their trunk and just neutralize it before it goes and takes out 10,000 acres or more.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny, people have all these grandiose ideas and, Doomsday Preppers, that stupid show just kind of, really tilted everybody's view towards preppers as these crazy people getting ready for, the SHTF, the shit hits the fan. And, trust me, having an oven fire in your house the day after New Year's is a little bit of shit hitting the fan in your own household, right? It took my wife and all of us to probably clean the whole house from all of the dust that goes, because it goes everywhere. We're still finding it 2 years later. You move a piece of furniture, you see this little pile of white stuff around the leg of a couch or something. It's disruptive, man. And then you can't cook. So I fixed the oven because I replaced all the elements in it that needed to be done. And we used it for a while, and then we finally replaced it just because we wanted the newer one. The oven wasn't faulty. It was a grease fire. And, but, people want to go buy the trailer and the big truck and have it full of stuff. I said, so you can leave that trailer out there for a year and take it out once or twice a year. And you're going to have old, stale, bottled water in there, which is not good. It's like in that hot trailer in Antioch and is like all of us except for Nick, we all live here in the San Francisco Bay Area in different parts. And it's, we've had triple digits for a few days now. It was 108 up at your place, Greg, and it was about 104 down here in Antioch. And so you leave that stuff out in the car for a few days or weeks and it's no good. You can't drink that water. It's not safe. So, it's like, think basic, think about a disaster that will impact your family and then grow it out from there instead of, I'm going to do all this big bang stuff and then your house burns down because you didn't have a fire extinguisher to put out the fire when your kid lit the curtains on fire. Or you had a pallet of toilet paper in your garage too that went up there. Yeah, that's always a good one because you can eat that, right? You can eat that. Isn't that? That's a survival item. That's like that's trading items, dude, after the apocalypse. Oh my God.
But it's funny. I actually believe in toilet paper, not the mass hoarding. But one thing I have in every single kit, whether it's my EDC bag, my trail running backpack, my go bag, is I have one quart size Ziploc bag with a couple packages of Kleenex tissue and like the travel size toilet wipes.
Yeah.
Because, we were, and I've been doing this forever. It's fantastic when you actually need it. Like, it's like, ooh, that was a genius move. We moved right at COVID, right when all of the moving companies had all of these stringent policies.
Oh, okay.
And we had to move 380 miles. There was not one gas station or public restroom open at all.
Yep.
And we had no way of knowing that in advance. and we had both of our bags and we broke into that. I mean, we basically got off the freeway, and it is just fantastic when you have a little bit of toiletries, especially those baby wipes. They go a long way. So that's all I'll say about the TP fronts.
Oh yeah.
But having a little bit of kit really does help.
Before, it's not pleasant, man.
Yeah, I've got my, it's open right now, but I've got my backpack and it's filled with all that kind of stuff, right? And this goes everywhere. Every day when I used to go to work every day, I bring that in, I drop it in my office, get my ham radio out, put it in the charger, turn it on, listen. And they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm ready. We're ready for what? I was like, I don't know. But I got, people put their finger, you got to go, 1,000 feet down in the building to go find a first aid kit, or you come down to Jim's office. Jim's got everything, I got trauma kit, all that stuff.
It's funny you mentioned that. So I've always traveled like that because I've been stranded in Chicago O'Hare overnight at least a dozen times as a consultant going back to about 2008. And right before COVID, I was working in New York City for Golf Digest in the Condé Nast building, which is World Trade Center 1. And COVID hadn't started yet. And they made fun of me every time I came in with my little EDC backpack. I mean, I didn't have my firearm, magazines, or pocket knife, but I had like my flashlights and all the other gear. I had the radio, and every morning I'd have to go through security, and they're like, what is all this stuff? Like, you've got like 2 flashlights and like, half a dozen batteries. And they were just like, give like basically a full body search every morning for, every week I spent there out of the month in New York.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I would do when I got to the office space was take out those Clorox bleach wipes and wipe down my area of the conference room table,
right?
And get my hand sanitizer out. Like, you're just crazy. 2 months later, it was like, yeah, who's got all the freaking Clorox wipes stocked up and like ample supplies of hand sanitizer? So again, it's busting that whole doomsday prepper. I see myself like you as a practical prepper, where it's like, what are those things that you should have in advance? What skills? And they don't require a whole lot of work to get good at them. It's just common sense things about personal hygiene and how you're going to deal with water if the utility goes down, or power if there's an outage. So yeah, certainly not a doomsday prepper who's building a bunker, although that would be kind of fun to have.
Yeah. It's I got property way up in Modoc County, almost out of California, up the northeastern corner of the state. It's just raw property, but it's a place we can go, and it's 22 miles from the nearest city, and nobody lives within a 1.5 mile radius of the property. Nobody. There's like 2 cabins.
Do you have water up there? Is it
on
a well, or is it?
There's a pond on the property that's full for most of the year. So, but it's just for the family to go camping and do whatever. But if you had to go, if you got to bug out what, go where right? Don't try and figure it out. Have a plan, maybe 2 plans or even 3 plans. Some people even got a plan C, right? So
yeah,
but
my friend used to have a manila folder in his cube on the wall, and it said Plan B on it, and he just left it like pinned to the wall. He left it there for years, and I'm like, I'm never gonna look at it. He's like, dude, it's my Plan B, man. And we worked in the office. We used to we supported a Salesforce IT Salesforce, and I went in there after he left, and he left it up there, and it was a application for McDonald's, dude. I thought it was.
Awesome. Greg, what do? You keep on talking about SOPs and having to read.
I do IT. I do application architecture in biofarm industry specifically.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. It's pretty narrow, but it's good. And that's bringing me out to North Carolina. So kind of
very cool. Yeah. I used to have a biotech background. I worked for a couple of biotech companies in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
Invitrogen, they later became Life Technologies, then Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Gotcha.
And we sold some of our consumables to like the big, like kind of biopharm kind of space as well.
Yeah. I worked on the manufacturing side for quite a while. And we've got offices. Well, my old company's got offices down there, but I just recently was thinking I was getting out of GMP work and took a job in product development. And I was like, yay, I don't got to write SOPs anymore. And they have dragged me right back into that work, man.
Yeah.
I hate documentation, man. But whatever, it pays the bills. It's fine.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna sign off because 4 o'clock comes early.
Yeah, me too. I think it's probably time to go. I've got this Pi calling my name, and I just can't get away from it. Like I want to go configure everything, get it all set up, because it's the little things that irritate me. What's that?
I thought you meant a pie with crust. I was
No,
gonna ask each
no.
pie, berry pie.
It's raspberry.
He's got to set up for the tooth fairy coming, right?
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
gotta say,
Yeah.
Molly, did you guys see Molly? She runs in and she's like screaming. I'm like, whoa, calm down. And she's like, my tooth fell out. It's pretty cool. So
Good for
it's not
her.
the first one, but she's excited. It was her first day of school today, and so she's all excited to go back to school because school's been kind of on hiatus all of last year, and yeah, so it's good to get her back out and integrating with other kids. It's amazing how much we as humans need to socialize with people like kind of in our age bracket, like little children. I don't know if you've ever seen this, and it's totally off topic, but I'll just say it. A little kid can teach another little kid how to do something way better than an adult can. It's amazing. Like you get them together and the things they learn how to do, it's just like, how'd you figure that out?
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
They're fearless. That's why.
Yeah.
Not always a good thing. It's not always a good thing, dude.
Not always.
I got busted teaching my little brother the F word when I was like 8. He went and said it to my mother. Where'd you learn that, Jason?
Oh, geez.
Good job.
All right,
Never
well-
taught that lesson again.
Fairly hard.
So Nick, what's the going rate on the tooth fairy these days? I don't have kids or small kids.
My wife's in charge of all the money, so I try not to get involved. But it's dollars, not cents, if that's what you're asking. I mean, it's whatever it is. The going rate's too high, but
Yeah, Jim.
No, $5.
Oh,
$5.
$5.
Probably, yeah.
No, I don't
thought-
know.
Well, that's inflation, man.
Yeah, it is.
I remember $1.
California. Yeah.
I keep it grandpa. I write him a check, dude. $5 check.
X in the middle, buddy.
Here you go, kid. Here's a $5 check for you.
Put a couple.
You
We put
need
a couple
a-
of IOUs in there.
A rock of bond from like GE or something.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, hey, Gaston, it was great having you. We chewed up the whole time with you, which is fantastic. And I think you were well received, and hopefully it'll help you out a little bit, get you over that 5,000 mark maybe. And so, keep in touch with us. I'll keep in touch with you for sure. But, we'll keep an eye on you on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely.
Likewise.